Members of the American Postal Workers Union handle more than 165 billion letters and packages a year. That's about 34 million pounds of mail every day. Ever wonder what this costs you as a taxpayer? Millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds of millions? Not a single cent. The United States Postal Service doesn't run on your tax dollars. It's funded solely by stamps and postage. Brought to you by the men and women of the American Postal Workers Union.
I thought she was armed with all the knowledge that she would need to stay off drugs.
I would steal pills from my friend's mom.
We talk about all of the common drugs, but never about prescription medication.
I was addicted to pills and I was living in a car. I stole a bunch of jewelry. I needed money for drugs.
Had I more knowledge about prescription drug abuse, I would have done things differently. Yes.
Help save kids from prescription drug abuse. Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
Hi, I'm Kathy Deck, and you're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
Hi, with me tonight is Mark McDonald. Mark, how are you?
Fine, fine.
Mark, you've written a book called called Gatekeeper of the Doomed.
Mm-hmm.
And could you tell us what this book's about?
This book primarily is about waking up America, to what's going on in the country, what's happening politically, what's happening to the citizens and their rights. And I find so many not aware. I find a great deal more people apathetic, okay? And so instead of writing articles and newsletters and, writing my senator, I thought I could reach more people by doing the book. So then I put, all the same ideas together and wrote the book. Again, with the hope of reaching, a great deal more Americans. So.
And of course, you call yourself The Last American. Is this a pen name or what?
This is a pen name, you bet.
I noticed you have, you write letters to editors too, with The Last American.
Yes, yes. And I've only signed it that way, though, since I wrote the book. So if you saw a lot of my articles before I wrote the book, The Last American was not on.
So how long have you been writing these things to newspapers then?
I've been writing them to newspapers for over 10 years. Really started back in 1982 with a very large article that I wrote. Again, I go back and laugh at that article and look at that article, to see how accurate the predictions were. Did I reach the people I wanted to reach, and was it accurate for the date and for the time?
What predictions were you making?
Making predictions about what was happening in America, what I expected to happen, both economically, socially, politically as well. And some things were right, some things were wrong, as you can very well imagine.
You say the word right, which is interesting because a lot of people would consider your views to be right or right wing.
Yes. And you know what? I think you need to define that, by today's standards. The same way you'd have to define a liberal, for instance, or a conservative. Liberal many years ago meant something else. But anyway, to answer the right wing first. I don't believe there's any such thing, as right wing, or extreme right, or religious right, or right-wing conservative, or religious extremist, for instance. And I don't think most of us, you know, who call ourselves conservatives, you know, our Christian conservatives, you know, believe that there is either. In other words, we are the middle of the road. We are the mainstream. We try to be not the middle of the road in that we, you know, that we're not decisive, but that we are mainstream America. We represent what America stands for, you know, and not anything to do with an extremist group or especially if there's only a few right-wing extremists, you know, and most of those are out of the country.
Who would you count those as right-wing extremists?
Like, for instance, a Muslim fundamentalist that kills for religious, you know, purposes is a right-wing extremist. You know, and you have to, again, you have to define that. He's killing someone for what he believes to be a religious principle, right? Okay, don't you think that we have a few people like that in America? They would like to kill someone and claim it's for a religious purpose. You know, Christians don't do that, see. Christians don't kill people.
But you have people,
Christians write books.
But you have people killing people and claiming to be Christians.
That's true. But you know what? You have to look at their lives. For instance, is the man out of Montana, you know, give me his name. Also the Freeman, the one that was just arrested for the Unabomber.
Right, I know who you're talking about.
And it's also Ski, and I just drew a blank. But you know, those type of people. We don't bomb people. We don't kill people. But now, on the other hand, if, for instance, the man who shot the abortion doctor, okay, if he claimed he was doing that for God, as Muslims do, then that's a different story. Then he's a right-wing extremist, you know. Then he is an extremist.
Actually, we have several men who shot people. Not just one, we have several men who shot people.
But not, doctor, there's someone who has shot clinic workers and some others, yeah. And again, if they claim they're doing that because God wanted them to, then they are a right-wing extremist, you know.
They also have a few wires crossed.
Again, as the media, you cannot group us or lump us, see, in the same category with those people. I mean, you just can't do that. For instance, the media would like to lump us with the skinheads again and call us, you know, right-wing extremists. Yeah. We have nothing to do with skinheads. See, again, they're not doing it for religious principle, but they think they're doing a social justice. You know, they think waving the Nazi flag with the Confederate flag, for instance, is doing America a favor. That's an extreme disservice they're doing America. You know, the generals and the proud Confederate men who fought for the Confederate flag would be dishonored in their grave, you know, by the skinheads waving a Nazi flag along with it. It has nothing to do with it. A Nazi, on the other hand, was a very extreme left, social engineering, Christian murdering, you know, preacher murdering group.
They're pretty much equal opportunity.
They kill lots of people, yes, but you have to remember, they also closed down hundreds of churches in Germany, shot preachers. They kill many Jews, who are, you know, of course, we feel as the forerunners to Christianity.
And homosexuals.
I'm not sure about that. You may, yeah, right. You may know more on that than I do in my research, you know, for the book. I didn't get into, you know, to the Germany or their persecution of, you know, any other group of people, you know,
basically,
as homosexuals.
I think it's anyone who wasn't like them.
Yes, I do know that they believed in a higher race, and that an Aryan or a highly bred race, in that they had breeding camps, you know, and they actually thought that they could engineer a superior human being, and they did some of that.
Yeah,
so
everybody would look like Dolph Lundgren. You mentioned references in your book and just now to the media, as in the liberal media.
Right.
Which for some of us, you know, in the media, that's like an oxymoron, because a lot of us haven't seen much evidence of liberal media.
If you're a smoker, in other words, right, and you're in a room with smokers, you're not going to smell the smoke from those other folks, right? And I know that may not be the best analogy, okay, but the same thing, you know, if you're in the media business and maybe, let's say, you're trying to keep a very open, objective viewpoint on everything, you know, totally neutral, it's, you know, it's probable you won't see them. But if you look at it from our side, that we see very few of our stories, you know, getting to the American public.
Now, when you see very few of the stories, what do you mean?
I mean, any of the stories, for instance, you know, why not the truth about real women, for instance, in America versus feminism? Why not the real story of the abortion and the abortion provider and the abortionist compared to the pro-life people? See, why not a true representation? We've even been called by the media a not only anti-abortion, but we've been called anti-abortion terrorists. We have nothing to do with terrorism, see?
I think
again, if you take the one man who shot the abortion doctor, okay, that's a different story.
Well, actually, there's been more than one person shot, and there's been actually about a score of people shot across the country. And I don't think they're referring to just Christians who are opposed to abortion. I think they're actually referring to people who threaten violence, or people who actually practice violence.
Or carry guns or threaten someone, yes.
But
for instance,
and those would be anti-abortion terrorists.
You could say the word terrorist, you know, but again, I don't know that they were terrorists before they pulled the trigger on somebody, you know, that type of thing. And yes, I do agree with that part, but think about this. The national right to life, for instance, you know, we've had no one shoot anybody. We've had no one even threaten someone at a clinic. We have marched in protest, we have held rallies, we have held life chains, and, you know, events that we feel help save the life of the unborn baby. So from that standpoint, yes, we are socially active, but by no means a terrorist, you know. So.
Okay, well, of course, you know, from the other side of you, because the press is owned by a relatively small number of people or corporations, so most stories that affect human beings are not going to make it into the newspapers. This is what liberals are saying now. I hate to use it, you know, get into liberal conservative stuff here.
Right.
But this is what people say, is that stories from a left point of view or a liberal point of view don't make it into the mainstream media. So maybe it's stories from both ends here are not making it in. This is why you see a proliferation of like programs on public access or alternative newspapers, because a lot of the news is really swallowed up and just suppressed.
Okay, I will agree to that point, because like you say, you know, even our newspapers and our large conglomerates, you know, there's very few hometown newspapers, and it's true that small local interest stories, okay, don't make it in. But you know, I'm even saying on any national or any important, okay, national issue that we feel that we need to be recognized on, we're seldom, you know, given that opportunity. For instance, back in the '92 campaign and the '92 election, the Turner Broadcasting Company, you know, ran several feminist programs immediately before the election, giving the feminist viewpoint. Even statements were made like, teach your daughters to be secretaries so that they may become secretaries of state, you know, pushing the feminist issue, pushing the abortionist issue.
You talked about that in your book, and you talk about women being secretaries, and you say it's all right as long as they don't exert authority over a man.
Right.
Now, you know, our director tonight is cheerful Maren Chisholm, but because she's the director, she has almost godlike authority in the control room, and she has control over us. She has control over us.
Oh yes, no doubt about it. She could change the camera right now and only show you.
Or she could cut my sound completely.
Yes, and mine.
I think she's tempted to do on occasion.
And mine, sure.
Just now, you talk about women not supposed to have authority over men. Now, where does that derive from?
Right. It comes from the teaching of the New Testament. You know, it asks that even though, you know, men and women may be equal in certain areas and in certain functions, let's say, okay, it strictly asks that in the church, woman not exert authority over the man.
Now you're saying that
because it's just the way the leadership was set up.
You're saying that in the church, though.
Right.
Okay, so which doesn't extend to, like, a woman could be Secretary of State and exert authority over men.
There are women Secretaries of State.
Yes,
matter of fact.
You had a woman Prime Minister in England. Then you had a woman Prime Minister of Israel. We have women in Congress. But that's not in the church. So they can, I mean, yeah, in that position, exert authority over men. I don't think there's anything in the Bible that prevents that, is there?
Right, and they do. But you'll also notice, you know, as I went on in, you know, on talking about the church, of, you know, also where, you know, I criticize our own Christian church, there are many instances where women are, you know, taking over leadership roles in the church. It's something we're going to deal with, you know, in the future,
well,
in the very near future.
I think that, you know, you say you have to deal with it. You know, in my church, the Episcopal Church, they faced this a long time ago, whether to have women as priests or not. In fact, there's a schism. A lot of the they have like the Church of the Neanderthals somewhere, but they have the mainstream Episcopal Church, which allows women priests, and a woman priest ministered to my father before he died, and I just wonder, do you think we're shortchanging ourselves by not allowing women positions of authority in religion?
No, I don't think we're shortchanging ourselves, okay? Again, now that's a personal viewpoint, okay? Because now you're coming down, you know, almost to the doctrine of my church, and of which we follow the New Testament, and it plainly says, you know, that the woman should not exert authority over the man. And how do you, you know, get women involved in the right activities, right, and the right work, and right working along shoulder to shoulder, right, with men? And it's a very difficult question, you know, and a very difficult issue, but in this case, we just have to go back to the Bible, and we try to follow the Bible as closely as we can, and that's, like I say, and that's where that you know, particular theory comes from.
But yeah, because you do talk about feminism a lot, and so basically, what I think what we're talking about is women in position, if we grant you this point, women in positions of authority over men, but not in other facets of life, though.
Right. I mean, in facets that do not apply, for instance, commercially, right? There are women vice presidents of a corporation.
Or women presidents.
And if I worked for that corporation, she was president or vice president, I would follow her directive, you know. You see what I mean? But, I mean, that doesn't bring her into my household and exert authority over me, you know, in the household. So, yeah, there is a difference. But I wanted to define, you know, feminism because I know you'd asked me a couple of times, Richard, and remind me also when we talk about liberalism to help me remember to define today's liberal as well, okay? Because if you don't, I'll forget. The feminist that I talk about in the book is a very radical feminist, okay? Pardon me. A feminist that believes in equal pay, for instance, for equal work, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, many jobs are not equal work, okay? So you're going to find that in America there are many inequities in salary, and that's very true. Especially they shouldn't occur in the professional realm, you know. And sometimes they still do, and you know, and I'm not going to cure that social ill tonight. But let me talk about the real feminist I'm talking about is a man-hater, okay? And they espouse to be so, okay?
Define man-hater.
Right. In other words, they think that somehow they need to push the feminist agenda as, for instance, the Germans did again in being superior, okay? I don't think anyone minds being equal to with someone, whether racially or ethnic or even equal sexually, okay? But they actually really hate men. They want women to have power. And by that they mean full power, you know, empowerment.
You're saying
empowerment over, empowerment over men's lives.
But do you believe that they want only women to have power and men to have
some
no
of them,
power?
Yes, some of them. And some of them actually write it that way, you know, in their magazines. And the other thing that they push is this, for instance, the abortion issue. They think that that also kind of validates, see, their independence, their independent thinking. They can show the world they're very independent by somehow calling it reproductive freedom and aligning it with civil rights. See, abortion has nothing to do with civil rights. But if the feminists can align that with the civil rights issue, look what ground they gain. Let me also go one step further. The homosexual issue is the same thing. If they can align themselves with civil rights, first of all, again, the feminist believes that a lesbian affair validates their feminism again, okay?
No,
it's sad, but now this comes from other articles, so...
Well, you know, I mean, a lot of this comes down to this. When you do research, okay, how many feminists have you actually sat down and talked with?
Only those who would sit down and talk with me, okay? And you're right, the rest of it is research in, not only from the television,
or
the books, articles.
Or how many gay or lesbian people have you sat down and talked with?
Several in that case, yes. But I'm saying these are from national magazines that I'm quoting, okay, that actually show there have been some feminists faint a lesbian affair just to further their feminist agenda. You follow me? And let me assure you, they do have an agenda, okay? Same as the homosexuals have an agenda. They do have an agenda, a very well-defined, a very well, even to date, executed agenda. It's also not private anymore. It is a very public, announced agenda.
What is the homosexual agenda?
The homosexual agenda you can find in here in the chapter, if I may turn to it, as you can very well guess. This is not so easy to find. They actually wrote and published a 12-point agenda, page 82 here. The agenda's been exposed in gay pride marches, okay, and the gay and lesbian gatherings across the country. They do not try to be discreet about it anymore. ABC after Bill Clinton. Here are the 12 main points of that agenda.
No, wait a minute. When you say agenda, who wrote this agenda? Was it was there like an election or?
This source here at the bottom of number 12, the source is the Lambda report, okay? Sodom's Second Coming, another research book which I have here,
that, yeah.
And the Family Research Council, okay? So all of these, and they have been published. For instance, boldly claim freedom of social restraint, demand independence from the moral order, associate homosexuality with other minorities in order to achieve legitimacy through strength in numbers and again through the civil rights issue. Anyway, all 12 of these are listed and published. So they have a very definite agenda. It's no coincidence they also have 12 active groups, okay, meaning 12 social activist groups, if you will, that push their agenda. The raised funds, they raise several $1 million per year through these 12 organizations, and they further that agenda.
Is every gay person part of this?
Indirectly, probably yes. As you know, as every Christian, wouldn't be involved. For instance, let's say in pro-life. Even though they do believe in it, everyone would probably not be actively involved with it. Am I making an analogy there? Or do you
I think
understand?
it's a very rough analogy. I don't think it's accurate. But I think it's a rough analogy. Most of the gay people I know are too busy working a 40-hour job, 40-hour week job, and,
or more.
Or more. And
many of them are professional people.
Yes, and involved in the same activities as. This is a situation like someone said. I think that any program on public access made by gay producers should be shown after midnight. I said, well, I said gay people fish. I said they hunt, and they like cook like everybody else. And I think we set gay people up and feminists as this subgenre of human beings, and all of a sudden, because of their sexuality or because of that, they automatically become suspect.
I'm more interested with the the real activist here again, okay? And and I guess if we get to talking about that, there are not only the, for instance, the Lambda fundraising group. They raise, like I say, millions of dollars. They also have a legal defense fund, okay? Again, and I think that's referred to as a Lambda defense fund. And so they push for those special rights, what we call special interests or special rights, above the normal rights of you and I, say the average citizen, the normal citizen. In that, let's face it, they're not discriminated against. Again, they're higher than average income. And most of them are professional, semi-professional people. Again, I'm talking about the activist group. And therefore, how can you say that, socially, that they're discriminated against?
Well, some are discriminated against. I mean, there is still discrimination in this country. There's still discrimination against gays or blacks, or
yes, I do agree with that. Of course, like you and I.
Against whites. I mean, there is
against you and I, sure.
There is prejudice in this country.
Sure.
So.
For instance, the law that affirmative action, for instance, it's really prejudicial against whites. It's sad But if you prefer any one over another one for a job or for any benefit whatsoever, then you're discriminating against that group.
Well, yeah, well,
really.
I think no matter the faults of affirmative action now, I think it's easy for us to forget the world before affirmative action. Which it was pretty much back of the bus was a metaphor for your entire life.
Yes, but of course you can go further back than that to the Civil War, you know. And sure, you know, they were slaves. But my question is, do we owe them something special because their forefathers were enslaved, you know, or persecuted? My people were persecuted, you know, both in Ireland and in America.
Yeah.
So were many. The Germans were persecuted here. The Polish people came over were persecuted here, you know.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, we're not the only. There are many groups that were persecuted in Egypt, in Iran.
Right.
So anyway,
Yeah.
so there's many persecutions going on and discrimination out there. But for instance, does Iran then owe us money? Does Egypt owe the Jewish, you know, the Israelites, money for enslaving them and forcing them to make bricks, for instance? But anyway.
The currency has changed. We were talking briefly about social engineering, and you were talking about Clinton and social engineering.
Yes.
And but you know, it's like social engineering seems to be a prerogative of presidents. Certainly Ronald Reagan was a social engineer on a massive scale.
What liberals, okay, and what I refer to as socialists, okay, try to do is socially engineer America. For instance, they would like to see us, for instance, socially engineered morally, almost to the point of moral bankruptcy. For instance, those things that we hold to be moral absolutes, okay, they would like to beat those doors down in America and say, there are no moral absolutes. Abortion, for instance, is an extreme moral issue. They would like to toss it aside casually and say, it's a woman's right to choose. It's a choice. Well, let me remind you that there's 1.5 million babies aborted. That's more than choice. That's more than a civil rights issue. That's more than freedom of choice. You follow me? They say they would like them to be rare, okay, and safe. 1.5 million is not rare. And along with that social engineering, you know, you've got to try and change children. Our schools are the most prime example of social engineering gone astray. For instance, mastery learning, okay, outcome-based education, Goals 2000, are all designed to change socially the child. For instance, in the Goals 2000, there may be one academic course for 4 social courses. Now, when I went to school, it was 4 academic courses and 1 social course.
When you say 4 social courses, what kind of courses are you referring to?
For instance, teaching the child self-esteem, tolerance for all religion, tolerance for all sexual preferences. Quote, their term.
Tolerance is what they teach you, I mean, like as a Boy Scout.
No, I think a Boy Scout is taught love for America and country and God, don't you think?
I was a Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout.
Okay, good. Oh, very good. Yeah,
but you see, I mean,
I wanted to be.
That's being a Boy Scout. Being a Boy Scout, and of course, I'm, I guess, nominally still an Episcopalian, and I was raised in the military. It had emphasis on service to the community, and all those things combined. And I benefited from a very good education, combined to turn me into a liberal. It wasn't like I wasn't like rebelling against anything that I had been taught as a kid. Mm-hmm. And Boy Scouts was one of the big things. And I think tolerance is one of the things we were taught in Boy Scouts.
Okay, and for instance, let's look at the social engineers there. They are absolutely taking lawyers and trying to force girls into the Boy Scouts. Now, could you actually call an organization Boy Scouts of America if there were girls? What would then you call it? What would it be?
I guess Scouts.
Where would they sleep in the tents? Where would they share sanitary and bathing facilities, for instance? It would no longer be Boy Scouts, would it?
You'd have separate, right? Yeah, separate bathrooms, separate showers, like in schools.
But I'm saying it would no longer be Boy Scouts. What would you call it, for instance?
I guess Scouts.
Yeah, Scouts. But what about the Girl Scouts? You wouldn't want boys going to the Girl Scout camp, would you? I wouldn't, personally. I wouldn't. But anyway, that's only one part of it. along with that, not only that type of social engineering, but what about sexually? Trying to teach those children homosexual teaching, for instance, in our schools, not just simply teaching them to accept it, but to teach them that it is okay, that there's nothing wrong with it, that morally it's fine. They should accept everyone, you know, and be tolerant of everyone and be tolerant of everything. The danger in that is you could be tolerant then of everything. For instance, you could be taught to be tolerant of pedophiles, murderers, thieves, you know, anyone who breaks both God's law and man's law, you know, social law. You could teach them to be tolerant of that as well. We don't want any national organization, especially the NEA, especially Washington, and doubly especially on Washington, teaching our children that morality is a matter of personal preference, that it is somehow relative. There you get the term relativism, okay? And you get many terms, you know, like moral relativism.
Is it the school's place to be teaching morality in the first place?
No, that is very true, but here's the other point. We don't ask them, you know, to teach our religion or morality in schools, okay? We simply ask that the other side, the homosexual teaching, the sex training that almost encourages them to indulge or engage in sexual activity. We don't want the other side teaching their, you know, brand of immorality to our children, okay? It's not so much we want to teach them morals. We want to get the other left wing, the social engineering out of our schools, and at least, you know, let it be a place where a child can grow up morally and straight, okay?
I don't think,
not being taught something else.
I don't know if anybody actually experiments with homosexuality unless they're like inclined that way naturally, because I think you have natural impulses.
For instance, New York City started a program. There's a group called the Rainbow Curriculum group, okay? They started teaching homosexuality to young children as young as first and second graders.
When you say teaching homosexuality, they're not saying, you know, look at the kid next to you, isn't he attractive? I mean,
no, but what about this? They introduced books in there called Heather Has Two Mommies, Daddy Has a Roommate.
Right.
Now that's actually indoctrinating them in the homosexual lifestyle, which is, you know, which is
isn't
very.
the homosexual lifestyle actually indulging in homosexuality, indulging in the sex act?
Not for those children, but if they teach them that that's okay and that's all right. For instance, a study in the same state showed that judges who were trying to award children to homosexual parents, you know, same-sex parents, they found that if one or more people in the family, over a third of those children, grew up thinking that they were either homosexual or bisexual when they actually weren't.
Yeah.
So, you know, so there is something to be said for changing, you know, young children at a very young, impressionable age.
Okay. We talked to about, in your book you talk about sexual harassment. You had an interesting line about the normal male aggression in the courtship situation, which could be construed as sexual harassment.
Right. Exactly.
Now, how do we define, what is normal male aggression?
We feel that when God made man and woman, okay, He made them both separate entities. Do they have an attraction for each other? Yes. I also think that the male, you can call it aggression if you like, but the male attraction, okay, for the female is stronger. I think it's also played out. We find that in many sport activities, right? I mean, if there wasn't male aggression, wouldn't there be only one, you know, for instance, women's boxing team, you know, for instance, and there's probably 1,000 men, you know, boxing teams. For instance, the fighting. So I'm saying there are many proofs that are out there. I don't need to go through that.
Aggression is an interesting word, though. Aggression is an interesting word. I mean, so I'm not sure what you mean by aggression.
Right, exactly. Well, as long as that aggression doesn't become right? Over-aggressive, let's say.
I'm not even sure.
It doesn't become to the point of harassing. Are you harassing the young woman? Are you harassing, right,
well, I don't know
the female
I sort
from
of
the
wouldn't
male
understand what
standpoint?
normal aggression would be in a courtship.
For instance, have you been around the campus, you know, where the men, you know, get in a convertible and go around and chase women around town, you know, all afternoon and whistle at them and wave at them? I'm saying there's a certain amount of that is a part of the male aggression.
We talk about North College, actually, where they pull up next to women at stoplights and they scream obscenities at them.
Okay, now see, that's gone too far, though, hasn't it? If you harass them or if you do anything obscene to them, let me back up a few years, okay? When I was in school, did we go downtown where the girls were? Yeah. Did we wave at them? Yes. Did we whistle at them? Yes. But were we harassing them? No, I don't think so.
Isn't it harassment in the eye of the beholder?
It could be, yes. But you can define that, how shall I say? You know, again, you can define that by almost any standard then, can't you? If, for instance, a woman came in this room and I looked at her, could she say I was harassing her or eyeing her unduly? You see what I mean? So, again, it's a matter of definition.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious about the aggression, whether it was like physical aggression we were talking about.
No, and I do not believe that, for instance, the term date rape, okay, falls under that same category. Many situations that can be claimed as date rape the next morning maybe was not indeed the night before. You follow me? It may have been between two consenting adults, for instance. But the next morning, the story told can be, as for instance, as the woman wishes it to be, or you know.
Man, I hate to sound prejudiced against my own gender, but it seems to me men as a whole don't understand subtlety very much. And I think it's easy for men to, it's like charge ahead with what they want sexually and not pay attention. You know when we were both younger, okay?
Yes.
You're talking about we're talking about 60s and 70s, okay? In a lot of men's magazines, and I read a lot of articles like this, when no means yes. Now, this is something our society teaches, that no doesn't mean no, you know?
Mm-hmm. And you know what, Richard, I'm glad you brought that up because that exactly goes along with what we're just saying, okay? When can you say no, right? I mean, there is a point of no return, right, in a relationship between a man and a woman.
I'm not even sure about, you mean talking about a sexual relationship?
Okay, yes.
I don't know. I think at any point in a sexual relationship, even I mean, in the midst of making love, in the midst of the sex act, if someone says no.
Okay, now see, and that's where you and I think would have to disagree because I think it's a little bit too late, don't you? In other words, what about especially as you're leaving the room, for instance, can you say no then?
No, after it's all over. After it's all over, it knows you can't say no. But at any time during sex with someone, if someone says no, then I think you gotta like stop.
Okay, but this is the point. The next day is what I'm concerned with. Okay, can the woman then say, no, I did not consent when actually she did? Number two, there are many fears. Okay, and let's face it, who has the fear? Doesn't the woman have a fear of pregnancy? What about peer pressure? What about what her folks think?
Or fear
and if she all of a sudden develops that fear the next morning, can she claim forcible rape when maybe it was consenting? And again, I'm not, I'm like you. I'm not trying to justify rape. Believe you me.
That's a possible scenario, but I think you've also got a case where someone could be like not afraid of peer pressure, but afraid of this hulking presence in the room, who may had a few drinks too many.
Yes, again, I agree. I agree there is such a thing as rape, okay? But, again, I don't want it to be used by that same group, okay, as an empowerment or as a power tool, okay? Is she gaining power over this individual? Can she control his life? Can she claim something that did not happen and send the man to prison, for instance, in the case of Mike Tyson? I often ask, what was the woman doing in his room on his bed? Now, and then we get back to the point of, right, how long and how late can she say no? I think maybe Mike was a very aggressive man, and you very well know he is. I've seen him in many out-of-the-ring situations and in the ring.
Yeah.
A very aggressive man. And then I think also he might be sexually aggressive, like you were talking about.
Okay. Before we go, I just want to touch on one brief thing. It's said that the difference between conservative Christians and liberals, if you will, is that a lot of conservative Christians believe, especially in the end times, that they will be hunted down and actually killed by people, say, of the liberal ilk. And a lot of liberals believe that conservative Christians would like nothing better to do than
hunt them down.
Hunt them down.
You know what? I look at end times, okay, in two different categories, okay? And you mentioned to me earlier, you know, your Episcopal religion. And again, I don't know how you feel about Revelation and end times, but I think, first of all, it's going to happen maybe globally, okay? And especially in America, okay, is a chaos that's going to turn to shooting, okay? I hope that doesn't happen, but I think that it might, okay? That's a personal opinion. Now, then the other one, of course, is concerned with the Bible, okay? Whether we are mid-millennial, which I think we're somewhere in mid-millennial. Some people think we're pre-millennial, post-millennial, okay? I do believe there's going to come a time of trial and tribulation that has to do with Jesus' second coming, okay, if you will. And I think that's separate and apart from the social chaos that's going to happen in America. I mentioned that in my book, okay? If we don't turn things around, for instance, if we don't, you know, bring America back to a moral-based, and I mean by that a biblical foundation, okay, as our founding fathers set it up, and actually fought for it, okay? And they gave their lives, and they dedicated their fortunes and their sacred honor, you know, as was written. And it was no easy sacrifice for them. They actually risked their farms, their businesses, their very lives to bring about a Christian nation. Yeah. And we want to pass that on to the next generation, okay? That is one of our concerns. Okay.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on the show tonight.
Oh, no, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll be back next week. So have a good week.
Hi, I'm Kathy Deck, and you're watching Fayetteville Public Access Television.
I thought she was armed with all the knowledge that she would need to stay off drugs.
I would steal pills from my friend's mom.
We talk about all the common drugs, but never about prescription medication.
I was addicted to pills, and I was living in a car. I stole a bunch of jewelry. I needed money for drugs.
Had I more knowledge about prescription drug abuse, I would have done things differently. Yes.
Help save kids from prescription drug abuse. Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
Members of the American Postal Workers Union handle more than 165 billion letters and packages a year. That's about 34 million pounds of mail every day. Ever wonder what this costs you as a taxpayer? Millions? Tens of millions? Hundreds of millions? Not a single cent. The United States Postal Service doesn't run on your tax dollars. It's funded solely by stamps and postage. Brought to you by the men and women of the American Postal Workers Union.
Been wearing a lot of brown and green, back to nature it would seem, but I don't know. I'm just laying low. Hadn't been much on getting around, hardly ever go to town, 'cause you know I'm laying low. No, there really ain't anything wrong, you see. I just need a little time for me. And I like to take things nice and slow. I'm kicking back, laying low. If you're wondering how I've been, when I'm coming back again, well, I can't say. So I just won't. Rest assured you're in my heart, even if we're far apart, don't be afraid. I'll be okay. No, there really ain't anything wrong, you see. I just need a little time for me. And I like to take things nice and slow. So I'm kicking back, laying low. No, there really ain't anything wrong, you see. I just need a little time for me. And I like to take things nice and slow. So I'm kicking back, laying low. I've been wearing a lot of brown and green, back to nature it would seem, but I don't know. I'm just laying low.
Speaking of poultry, which is actually a pretty cool way to do that.
Very good.
Lisa wrote a poem, the Poets of Arkansas, or
The Great Chicken Poets
the
of
Great
Arkansas.
Chicken Poets of Arkansas.
Are you ready for the Great Chicken
I'm
Poets
ready
of
for the
Arkansas?
Great Chicken Poets of Arkansas.
Let me backtrack in case anyone has joined us late. I am from San Francisco, and I drove across country and came to Arkansas actually by accident. And when I arrived in Siloam Springs at the visitor center, I had this experience recorded here in this here poem, which is a true story. It's called The Great Chicken Poets of Arkansas, or You Say Tomato and I Say Tomato. Clearly, she didn't want to be there fielding tourists at the Visitor Information Center, Siloam Springs, Arkansas. Boredom dripped out in her sighs and fingers grazing tired across a map. Here a river, there a lake, everywhere a good time. Nevertheless, she was helpful, if by rote. Miss Arkansas Information at last became inexplicably animated as I neared the exit. Tourism is very important to Arkansas. It's the #2 industry? Yes, right after poetry. I perked clean out of my interstate days. Nobody told me poetry was big business in Arkansas. Poetry? I repeated, incredulous. Oh, yes, she puffed. Chicken, turkey, all kinds of poetry. Well, I'd just come from a cowboy poetry festival in Oklahoma, so why not chicken poetry? My informant chirped merrily, why, there's Tyson and Cargill and, no doubt, famous Arkansas chicken poets, I deduced. Inspired by my interest, she crowed, yep, we've got more farms than anywhere else in America. Farms? Ah. Everything I really needed to know about the Arkansas accent, I learned in that exchange with the poultry pep gal at the visitor center, Siloam Springs, Arkansas.
But you didn't turn around and go back.
No, I didn't. It really had to sink in for a while. The enormity of what I had just